to me, there's two things. It's like crazy simple, but this is the way I think in stocks too. Is like, if you can't simplify it, you don't understand it. And so two things: control over your calendar, number one, and number two, that you're secure and confident and you don't care what other people think about you.
Hey, what's up? Welcome to Life in a Show. I'm your host, Jason Wojo. On the Life in a Show, we help people make more, work less, and live awesome lives. I am joined by my Polish co-host, Polish Peter. What's up, dude?
Hey, man. So I am really excited about this because I bet you didn't know this, that Polish people have royalties. And we got one today on the show.
Dude, we do. We literally have a descendant of Polish princess on the line right now. But I know that may not be the thing you're most interested in. But how about this? How about the fact that she ran the #1 fund, a global tech fund in '99? She has worked for 4 billionaires. She has founded or co-founded or was a founding member of 7 companies in everything from green energy, blockchain, education, finance, ultra marathoner. Like, I mean, just this woman is amazing, man.
Yeah, so you could listen for that, that she brings that to the table, or you could listen, like I was talking about, the fact that she's, descendant from Sobieski, one of the greatest Polish people out there who made some tremendous things in our own personal lives. But here's the thing, what I want you guys to listen to. One of the coolest things that I like about this particular episode, at some point she talks about happy billionaires, because she's worked for, I think, 4 of them, she says.
4 billionaires.
So what does it look like to be a happy millionaire, happy billionaire? And those little nuggets that she drops in there, I think are really impactful and powerful.
Right now, I just want to say something, because we get into a little bit of some tech and investing jargon. We start talking about hedge funds and this and that. And like, if that's your thing, you're going to love this. If it's not your thing, there's a tremendous amount of information that you can still learn here, even if you miss some of it. So don't get overwhelmed if some of this vernacular is a little bit foreign to you, or if it's new, because we're going to cover some really valuable things that are going to be applied, and if you use them to your own business, to your own life, and some incredible lessons that, regardless of the scope of income you're at, you can use those.
Yeah, and me and Vojo are going to debrief this, how we can actually take it into your own life at the end of this episode. So stay tuned.
Let's go into our episode right now. Here's Emmy Sobieski. Hey, Emmy, welcome to Life in Our Show.
Thanks so much for having me, Jason and Peter.
I am super excited to have this conversation. You are a very accomplished individual who, quite frankly, I ran through your CV and all the things you've done, and it's pretty astounding, actually, and diverse, which I found everything from, I saw bodybuilding and sprinting to ultra marathons to running the #1 fund in '99. And before we began recording, we started talking about one of the things that you're most passionate about is this concept you talked about is called creating happy billionaires, which I thought was like absolutely, that really struck me. And I'd love to talk about that more. First of all, tell people, how did you even get to where you are now? And what is it that lit that spark in you to kind of help people with their money and become successful financially and live happy lives?
Hold on, Amy, before you start, one more thing that he forgot to say that's great about you. You got one of the coolest last names ever.
Yes, so I should be listed as a princess, and I'm the direct descendant of the second to last elected king of Poland, King Jan Sobieski. So
that
anyway,
you are royal. So this is the first royalty we've had on the show, actually, Peter. Like, yeah.
And the only time
you should bow.
Well, actually, I think the appropriate thing to do is to kiss my feet. So the only time that this has actually happened was I was traveling around Europe when I didn't have any money, and but I was very happy, and I went around for 6 weeks, and this was at a point where so I just left my passport at my friend's apartment in Paris, and I was going around all different countries, and I was going to fly out of Paris. And I come back so I call her up. This is before internet, cell phones, all this. This is really going to age me. So I call her up and she's like, "Oh, I'm vacationing in Normandy." I'm like, "Well, I have a flight tomorrow. I need my passport out of your apartment." And she goes, "Oh, let me call a friend." And her friend happened to be Polish. And when we met, I introduced myself and I said, "Oh, I'm Emmy Sobieski." And you know how you meet someone, you're shaking their hands and you're looking eye contact, and all of a sudden, boom, she drops all the way to the ground and she's literally kissing my dirty shoes that have walked around all of Europe for 6 weeks. So
Wow.
apparently that is how to greet me.
Peter, I would like to request that you do the same for me when we do the events, if you don't mind.
Keep dreaming.
I don't think you're a descendant of a king, though.
Somewhere we must be related somewhere. I'm thinking.
No,
You know, I'm not sure where. I'll dig that up.
that's a far stretch. That's very far stretch.
So let's see. So let me start at the beginning, and this is going to sound especially funny because I just told you I'm a princess. But when I was growing up, and again, I'm in my mid to late 50s now, so it was quite a time ago. My dad and the U.S. was trying to encourage people to learn about recycling, and so you could recycle aluminum cans for 25 cents a can. That's a lot of money.
Wow.
So we lived in a really nice neighborhood. My dad was a lawyer. My mother was a screenwriter, although at the time she was struggling and, you know, just kind of getting by. She became successful, but at the time, that's where she was. And we used to go around and go through all of our neighbors' trash cans at night and collect aluminum cans. By the time I was 16, I had $1,800 that a few checks for birthdays or whatever, but the bulk of it was from collecting and recycling aluminum cans. When I turned 16, my dad says to me, "It's time for you to learn about investing. When you're 16, you're allowed to own your own investment account at the time." And so he said, "Here are 4 stocks that I like, and you can just pick from one." And he tells me the story. And anyway, one of them was this is again going to date me. Movie theaters only offered popcorn. They didn't offer candy or any kind of, and this United Artists had this idea to offer all kinds of candy and food and more different types of drinks. And we bet that was going to be very successful. Well, 4 months later, it got bought out for 4x what I bought it for. And so I put $1,600 in. I have $7,500. I'm thinking, well, this is cool. And so I go back to my dad. We got to buy another stock because this one's been bought out. And he says, well, you know, so he gives me a couple stories, but one of his was a friend of his who had figured out how to profitably service Medicare and Medi-Cal patients. It was a tiny little healthcare services company. And then there were other great stocks, but that one I thought, you know, my dad knows this guy. It sounds really cool. So I invested in that, and that's FHP now, which is an enormous company now. Anyway, that went up 4x. So now I'm looking at like $32,000. And I thought, yeah, it's just a health services company. I mean, granted, at the time I'm 17 or something. What do I know? But I kind of think 4x for a services company, it's probably good enough. And so my dad says, hey, by the way, I just got back from this board of directors meeting in Seattle. And one of the other board directors, his son, just joined this company called Novell. And this is before Cisco existed. This is back in the 80s. And he said, this allows computers in the same office to talk to each other. And I thought that sounded super cool. I mean, he gave me some other ideas, but I was like, that is cool. And so I do not recommend anybody do this, but I put the full 32,000 in that, and then it went up 10x. So I'm a sophomore in college and I have $320,000. And you know, I'm thinking, well, this is easy.
Yeah, right.
You know? And so, you know, I start going, I mean, as your typical hero's journey, I start going to parties, start enjoying myself. I say to my dad, hey, you can manage the money while I'm, you know, finishing off college and starting my career. I started my career and I was riding horses in college. I went to the Junior Olympics in college. And then right after college, my mother dies. I inherit from that $200,000. So now I have $500,000, right? And I'm like, whatever, 23. But I'm just doing my job and minding my business. I really look at investments as separate. I don't look at that as like spending money. And anyway, but the death of my mother really was affecting my dad, and he got obsessed with this one biotech stock, and he put everything in it. And then as it would go down, he would borrow more money and borrow more money and borrow more money. And this happened with like my grandmother's money and, other people that he was helping, or managing their money. And, so the net of it is in 1992, when I went to graduate school, which was just, let's see, I graduated college in 88. So 4 years later. So I went from $500,000 to 1992 in the biotech crash. They were unable to sell, because of the computers at the time were slow, to sell the stock fast enough to pay off the margin debt. So I had negative $30,000 in my brokerage account. Which is not good. I went from plus 500,000 to negative 30. I had a horse that I thought I could sell for 30. So I sold the horse for 30. And again, this is a really benefit to your network, and you can either have it or build it. But the head of the brokerage firm was my dad's fraternity brother. And I went in to talk to him and I said, look, I know that in the regular stock market, you allow 50% margin. So 50% debt, 50% cash or equity or whatever you'd consider it. But at the brokerage firm, they're more conservative. So it's like 30%. I said, I could pay off this thing, but then I'm wiped out. Would you let me try to trade with this? And, the guy's living in an $80 million home. I think he could pay off the thing with his, like a day of his interest. So, but I didn't know that. So I felt super badass when he was like, yes. And so I took the 30 cash from the horse, the 30 debt, so 60, invested that and luckily it was at the right time in the markets, and so the macro was right, and I wasn't really aware of this at the time. But I was in business school in front of a Bloomberg. I was taking classes. I was focused completely on small cap tech in 1992, which was coming out of the recession, which is exactly when you want to invest in small cap tech, because people have given them up. They think they're gonna go bankrupt, and so they're super cheap, and then they're the ones that can grow the fastest. So you get the biggest returns. So 60K turns into 120K in 6 months. I pay off the 30. I have 90. And a girlfriend of mine is watching this, and I had been a horse trainer and an asbestos litigation paralegal up to then, right? I just did this on the side. My girlfriend's like, there's people that would pay you to do that. I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. This is like playing Pac-Man. And so 5 years later, I was running the number one fund in the world. And that was up 497% in 1999. And then right after that, and I made that boss $24 million in 1 year because he put $4 million in. And then I used that job, and I was paid $130,000, by the way, for making him $24 million. And so got a different job where I was paid better at the time. What I viewed was it was a very reclusive hedge fund, but it was really the best and smartest and brightest hedge fund manager at the time. And his 10-year track record was number one. It just wasn't public. And so I got one of these. I got like the coveted job on Wall Street, worked for him for 3 years. And one of my trades made him personally over $100 million.
So this is incredible. This is amazing. And I have to stop you here because there's so much I want to ask you to unpack for us a little bit.
Go for it.
So first of all, how in the world do you go from being a horse trainer and an asbestos, a litigation paralegal to running the number one fund in just 5 years? Like I would expect that person to be, they have a master's from Wharton, and they're MBA, and they have like all this. I mean, how did you? Was it just your track record, like your network?
No, I have no track. I mean, first of all, nobody's going to trust a personal like your personal account, your PA track record, and especially mine, because in an institutional basis, you're required to hold, like when I ran the number one fund in the world, I was required to hold over 100 holdings. So my personal track record of buying one stock and then putting it in one more, I mean, it would be like, so none of that really, no, I think there are two things. Number one, a lot of times people ask me, should I do an MBA? And I say no. But the best reason to do an MBA is to change careers, because they've got career services there. They train you in corporate finance. They train you in everything. And they've got a lot of people that are looking to hire MBAs. And so that's number one. And then number two, which I received the best advice, again, just a random friend from my dad, but it's go to lunch, ask people questions. If you don't have a dad like mine with lots of interesting, weird friends, go to Starbucks, ask people what they do.
So that's incredible. So have you ever considered teaching people how to invest? Like, is this ever something that and how much of this do you feel like is skill versus intuition and learned versus kind of like you just have an instinct for it?
Oh, no. So this is very much the same thing that entrepreneurs go through, which is it's an iterative process. So you make a trade. Does it work? Does it not? Does it work in the short term? Does it work in the long term? Were you early? Were you late? And so you just keep reflecting, writing, remembering. So I think the biggest thing is I have a nearly photographic memory. So I can listen. When I worked at the hedge fund, I covered 300 companies. So I could remember everything that those 300 companies said 3 months ago on the earnings calls. So then I could be like, well, it was this, right? And so, but that photographic memory also helps me remember all my mistakes and improve from them. And not only that, but remember what you did right so that you can do more of that. So I think for me, it's this feedback loop, and it's the same feedback loop that you want to do as an entrepreneur, as someone focusing on your career, anything like that. It's just, did I do it right? Didn't I? Get the ego out of there. I've just read a fantastic book, Ego is the Enemy. It's really helpful. If you have ego in the market will slaughter you. So, so I think, and so then 25, years in, and look, it looks like instinct, right? But by the time even though it was 5 years of institutional investing, or 5 years between leaving my MBA to running that fund, and probably I think that was like 4 years of institutional investing. I've been investing since I was 16, right? So now sometimes I paid more attention and sometimes I was partying, but I'd been looking at the markets and thinking about investments since I was 16 years old. And I'd been listening to my dad talk about it at dinner, on every walk. I mean, my God, so I think it's just like, it looks like instinct when you've had your 10,000 hours.
Hey, we'll get right back to our episode, but before we do that, we want to tell you about something super special and important that I want to make sure you know about, and that is our millionaire events. There are two in particular that I want to draw your attention to. One is called the Get a Life Getaway, and we've been doing this for almost 15 years now. Peter and I have been doing this together for about 8 years together, and then we have our Business Builder Workshop. And this is why it's so important, because if you don't have the ideal life you want, guess what you need? A vision. A vision is something that we create at the Get a Life Getaway. And listen, it takes us a full 3 days to do that. And so we've been doing this for so long. We've refined the process. We've perfected it. We've walked almost 10,000 people through this process, and we want to show you this process. Now, you can probably try and do it on your own, but why would you try and reinvent the wheel? Let the experts, let us hold you hand in hand through this process. Peter and I teach these personally. You're getting this right from us. And that's the first part of this equation. Now, the second part is like, hey, let's say you decide that you want to work 20 hours a week and you need to make $100,000 to live your vision. Well, guess what? We teach you at the Business Builder Workshop. Exactly that. We will walk you hand in hand and show you our proven process to remove you from your business, to help you make the money you want, to enable you to own your business rather than have it own you. Peter, these events are awesome, man.
Oh yeah, we do these throughout the throughout the years, and we're doing them throughout the country. So head over to one of these events, because you'll be surprised how amazing it is to write your vision for your life. I wish somebody would have told me this 10 years ago to do that. When I came here to this country, I had no freaking clue what a vision is, whether to actually write it. So the fact that you're sitting here on this podcast and hearing this message, I would encourage you that this is something that you would go ahead and do that sooner than later. So how do they go about doing that, Vojo?
Well, and Peter, not only that, but we have a very special offer for them. Because you are a loyal podcast listener, I know you're tuning in every single week, hanging on every word. You've given us reviews, ratings, thumbs up, told your parents about it, your mom, your dad, your dog, your neighbor. We are giving you a 50% off, 50% off special offer. So you'll go and choose either the Business Builder Workshop or the Get a Life Getaway. Like Peter said, we do these all over the country. We do about a half dozen of these events per year. And when you check out, after you choose which event you want to attend, then you will enter the promo code PODCAST. PODCAST. Podcast is your promo code. You'll instantly get 50% off, and we will see you at an event soon. Now, here's my advice. Don't wait to attend this. Don't wait to register. Put it on the calendar now. Go right now. Pause the podcast if you have to. Go open a browser. Go to lifeinair.com. Enter that podcast promo code at checkout, and we will see you at an event soon. Let's get back to the episode. You've made incredible decisions. You've made a lot of people a lot of money. And then you kind of, we alluded to the beginning of the episode, like this, of becoming either, a multi-millionaire, a billionaire. And is this something that you think is within the reach of more people than they believe? Or do you think this is really something that this is kind of like you're pushing the limits of what most people are able to accomplish? Can the average person become a decamillionaire, for instance?
So it depends on their age, because it's all about compounding.
Okay.
So even if you think about Colonel Sanders, he had this huge success, but by the time he figured out the franchise model, he was 60. So when he died with $3 million. Now that's a lot of money, but he didn't have the opportunity to make it into 100 million because his first chunk that he started compounding off of came too late in life. So that's the only thing. And I'm going to weave this into an earlier question. You said, have you ever thought about teaching investing? I have an investing course online that is just like 60,000 words of everything I ever knew about investing and how to do it, et cetera. So I have that, you can find that through my website, but I have that online. And what happened is two things. The people that went through it said this piece on these 5 careers and finding leverage is incredible. So then I ended up writing a book in order to mentor at scale. And the second thing that happened is, yes, I love teaching, and I love teaching it in person. And so what I did was I mentored students at UC San Diego, my alma mater, for 10 years. I had I had kind of harsh rules. So the dean of economics kept saying, hey, you should teach this class. And I said, so here are my rules. She's like, yeah, you should keep it as a coffee gathering off campus. So my rules are basically like, if you've got to show up with a stock pitch, you've got to be able to pitch it verbally. And if you don't have a stock pitch, don't come. You're not welcome. This is not television. You're not listening. You're learning through doing. And so if you haven't done your work, that's fine. Come back next week when you have. And that just didn't really work for the whole, University of California system. But what I found was these mentees, who I'm incredibly proud of. One of them went to community college, and then because he couldn't afford a 4-year state college, imagine that. So 2 years community college. He was an amateur boxer to pay his way, then switched over to options trading because he worried about the risk to his too many concussions effectively, and went on to retire before the age of 30, came out of retirement to build a software firm, which he's just sold. Another one of mine was a blue collar. Neither of his parents graduated college, completely blue collar. He said he's going to go into management consulting, but he really wanted investments, but he wanted to hedge his bets. I said, don't hedge your bets. You're brilliant. He was in my investing course, and he's managing, not even 30. He's at a big private equity firm. He's incredibly successful. I had another who was Forbes 30 under 30, immigrant, non-traditional background, UC San Diego, and she started her own hedge fund at the age of 26 and a half and was Forbes 30 under 30 and is a millionaire by the age of 30. So that's the first. So there are 25,000 households that are self-made 100 millionaires in the US. So it's totally doable. The reason that I write my book is to mentor at scale for people who didn't get told how to go on the board of directors because they don't have a dad like mine, or they didn't grow up in Silicon Valley, or they didn't grow up in New York. And what I've proven with my mentees over the last 10 years is that if you know the path and you're excited about it, you can do it.
And so that's something you help people discover for themselves. And does this tie into also the five paths that you talk about?
Yeah. So there are many more paths. I mean, you look at 25,000 families, they're all over the place. This is what I know, and I only want to teach what I know. So I know the areas in finance where that are kind of 5 obvious paths. So they are private equity, hedge funds, venture capital, startup founder, and board director. And the cool thing with the last 3 is that there's kind of a flywheel there, in that you could start as venture capitalist and get a chance to meet a co-founder and start up a company. And then you have success in your startup, or you're looked at as a great venture capitalist and you're invited on boards. And pretty soon you're a venture partner somewhere. Your day job is ramping a startup and you're on several boards. And so you have these massive amounts of equity and income all building at the same time and feeding off each other.
And to get those positions, though, like what's the barrier to entry to these kinds of positions? Like, because imagine if you're going to be a board member, you already have to. And by the way, I'm speaking out of ignorance here because I am not a board member. I'm assuming you have to have some big wins in your name and a reputation, and so you got to do all that pre-work prior to these things, correct?
Yeah. But so here's the thing. This is like the piece people get later in their career and they're like, I'd like to be on a board. And they don't know what people are looking for, and they look what they're looking for and they don't have it on their resume. And so what a board wants is to grow their company so they can all get rich. Right? It's like, that's it. Right. And so and it's very much, if you think about how we all, like, you choose a course online, or you choose clothes to wear, or someone to idolize, you want to work with someone who's 10 steps ahead. So if you've gotten, I mean, this is why sales is such a fantastic job. If you have control over a profit, like P&L, I call it P&L responsibility. But if you have your own P&L responsibility where you've got to make the numbers, and you could say, hey, I was at this startup and I got head of sales after a while, and I was responsible for taking this startup from 50 million to 100 million. Now, every startup that is at 30 to 40 million is going to want you as a board director to tell them how to get from 50 million to 100 million. You do one from 100 to 200, all the ones that are at 80 and 90 are going to want you to take them from 80 to 90. So private board work, it's really interesting. If you're on a private board, it's 85% strategic. It's super interesting work, and you can get it the way I described. Public board work, especially after Sarbanes-Oxley, Madoff, Enron, WorldCom, all of these various scandals, is the exact opposite. It's 85% like making sure you dotted the I's, cross the T's. It's 85% regulatory. Can still pay a whole lot of money. I think the private board area is much more interesting. But so that's like later in your career. Are you building the resume where someone's going to want you on a board later in your career? You've got to know that at the age of 20 or 30 or 25, and then how do you get into those careers, and how do you figure out which one is the one that's right for you? And so that's why I wrote this book. The short answer is pretty much, if you're any age, you can get into a startup. Private equity, hedge funds, VC, it's a little bit earlier, and your best path, the path with the highest chance of success, is going from college into investment banking or management consulting, and then going from investment banking, management consulting into a large hedge fund, private equity, or venture capital fund. And this is what I call the 3 Bs. break in, build equity, break out. You only need to do the first two to make 100 million. So break in is just what I described. You work in investment banking, management consulting, and then you break into your private equity firm. You break in to your hedge fund, your venture capital firm. Once you're in there, you need to build equity. You need to not do what I did, which is just keep getting paid a salary. Granted, my salary was large at the hedge fund, but it was still, and it was percentage based. It was as close to that, but I didn't own that or own a piece. So you want to be running a large you want to get to the point at any of these portfolio management places that you're running a large portfolio and you're getting paid a percentage of other people's money. So if you're running $1 billion, you're getting paid more than if you're running 100 million. So you want to start getting paid not based on your time and not based on comps to others, but based on how much money you're running, because then the sky's the limit as to how much you can get paid. And that is like Bill Gurley at Benchmark, he and I kind of went up through Wall Street at similar times. And he started as like literally an engineer at Compaq, and he's worth $7 billion as a partner at Benchmark. The next step is break out. And that is take that experience you have, the relationships with those institutional investors that you've been running money for at that larger firm, and hopefully get actually the backing of your boss at like the head of the firm, like a Larry Fink, the head of BlackRock, the head of Blackstone, wherever you are, get their blessing, get their investment, take a few investors, and the investors wouldn't take everything with you. They might just say, oh, for a different type of a thing, or, we'll carve out this thing. So you bring the investors with you. And with this kind of strategy, you could start with a $2 billion fund day one, which Carl Croker did coming out of Citadel with a semiconductor fund. But that's the moment where you can become a Bill Gates and Elon Musk. And we're talking about when you start your own thing, we're talking about billions to, in their case, hundreds of billions when it's a startup.
It's just staggering, the scope. Most people are like, oh, I've made, $5 million, or I have $10 million. And they think that that's like just a tremendous amount of money until you start realizing but there's still people 100 times more wealthy than that. It's just the scope is just staggering. What is the relationship you've seen? Like we started talking about this, is like the relationship between, happy billionaires. Have you seen a relationship either, positively correlated or negatively correlated with like the amount of money somebody has and how happy they are? Or is there any relationship at all?
Well, there's a basic amount of money that allows you to have much more freedom of your calendar and freedom of choice. Then at that point, the question is, do you take it? And sometimes the answer is no. And then those people are pretty miserable. So what I had someone come to me recently who had made a good chunk of money and wanted to map out, the next phase for himself. And he said to me, you work with 4 billion, you've been among many more billionaires, but you work directly for 4 billionaires. What are the commonalities? And I would say, the hedge fund billionaire I worked for was the happiest. And here are the things. And so I said, look, let me break it up. When you say happy billionaire, number one, when you have all the money in the world, what drives your happiness or lack of happiness? Like what would make you unhappy? And then how do you remove that? And then how do you get and stay rich, right? Those are the two pieces you need to be a happy billionaire. And so to me, there's two things. It's like crazy simple, but this is the way I think in stocks too. It's like, if you can't simplify it, you don't understand it. And so, two things: control over your calendar, number one, and number two, that you're secure and confident and you don't care what other people think about you. And if you have those two things, I challenge you to try to be unhappy.
Right.
You get up when you want, you don't care what anyone thinks. Most people with those two conditions are happy. And so if you're a billionaire with no worries about money and you have those two things, you're pretty set. Then the money side is make sure you continue to do activities that are leveraged activities, not activities it's like you put $1 of your time in and you get $1 of your dollar out. So most amount of money for your time and expertise. So any activity, you need to really look at what activities am I doing? And then those that are still necessary but aren't leveraged, hire a fantastic assistant, and free up your time. You don't need to fill up your calendar. Again, control over your calendar. I have to say to myself sometimes, the role of my calendar is not to fill it. It's just to know what key things I have to be at. But I enjoy having free time during my day. And then number 2, align your personality with whatever career path you're doing and whatever activities you're doing, because that means you'll stick with it and you'll be able to enjoy the benefits of compounding. And then number 3, pay attention to the macro. And so I had, 2 of the 4 are very happy. And both of them one of them particularly, Art Nicholas, is the founder of Nicholas Applegate. He sold that company at the highest multiple ever seen for an investment management company in February of 2000. And this thing is like momentum. I mean, it just crashed right after that. And he cashed out 100% for himself. I mean, it's incredible. But he also he owned Desi Arnaz's place on the beach in Del Mar. Desi Arnaz used to own it. And he built it into this compound. He bought 6 houses, 2 along the beach, 2 in, and then 2 more in, and then built this huge compound. Anyway, sold that at literally 2006 at the height of the real estate market. Then when the real estate crashed, he bought up all these properties in Rancho Santa Fe, built another compound. So he is just, again and again, it doesn't matter the market. It doesn't matter if it's private markets, public markets, real estate. He's buying at the bottom, selling at the top, buying at the bottom, selling at the top, which is super interesting because his entire background was as a momentum trader. But his specific piece of momentum is like very simple again, and it was buy what's going up. And if they had all done that, I had left Nicholas Applegate by then. But if the people that were underneath him understood that simple principle, that were working there and didn't just keep buying tech because they thought they were tech investors, they would have done brilliantly, because in 2000, healthcare went up huge, energy went up huge. I mean, they would have just looked golden. So, but that's a big thing. It's like, pay attention to the macro.
Wow. That's those are incredible bullet points. And like, I think it also brings it back to, in some regards, of how simple it also is. Like, your calendar, high leverage activities, aligning your personality. Like, these are things that, you probably don't have to be a billionaire to be able to experience and to look at. And so those are some real take home lessons for people. Is there anything else that you feel like would be a real, like, what's like one thing maybe, and as you shared your story, and Peter and I will talk about this in the outro, because I see so many things, you listened, you had mentorship, your dad, you were around the right people, you were bringing people to lunch, you were picking their brains, you were looking and spotting opportunities, you were, taking action. There's so many things that accounted or contributed to your success, I'd say. Is there any underlying principle that I missed that you feel like is really important, a guiding principle, some sort of, that our listener could really dive into, and that I haven't mentioned yet?
So you may have noticed, for someone in my mid to late 50s age, I have a lot of energy, and that is not by accident. So my entire chapter 2, I'm writing a book. It's called $100 Million Careers. Here are your 5 fastest paths to wealth. The largest chapter is on health. And my advice is to build a foundation of health. And I see that foundation as both physical and mental health. And there are 3 prongs. Number 1, move every day. And again, in alignment with your personality, find something you like to do. So move every day. Number 2 is nutrition, and nutrition is not complicated. Stay to the outside of the grocery store, eat whole foods, and stay away from sugar. Like I have no problem with salt, but processed foods are actually like there's all kinds of weird neurotropics. There's stuff in there to make your brain want to eat more, to get fat, all that kind of stuff. So those companies are designed. I mean, they need to grow too. So they grow by us all getting fatter and eating more of their food. So they design it to make you do that when you eat. So fruit, vegetables, whole foods, keep it simple, take out the sugar, take out the processed foods, you're good to go. I don't worry about saturated fat. That's number 2. Number 3, mental health. You've got to be able to connect with other people. You say, well, Emmy, I'm working 80, 100-hour weeks. There's no time. I don't, how am I going to have time to, have romance or have a husband or whatever? Out of UNC Chapel Hill, Dr. Barbara Friedrichsen wrote this great book called Love 2.0, and she discovered this with her relationship with her husband as well. She applied her own research, which is that love and connection happens through micro moments of connection. And I actually met through John Chambers, the CEO of Cisco, Bill Clinton. And his power is giving someone 100% of their attention in the moment that he's with them. In the moment that he's with them, they are the only person in the entire world. And you can do this. And the way that it works in our brains, they don't know the difference between like some big, Hawaii vacation or feeling like the center of the entire universe for 10 minutes. And so you build love and you build this connection with another human being through kind of cumulative micro moments of connection. And you can do that in a coffee shop, asking a random person how their day was, complimenting someone. So make sure you're connecting with family, with friends, with, in networking and everything, and it will improve your mental health massively the more that you can be grateful, complimenting, etc. So those are the 3 pillars that I say. Basically, you're not going to have the stamina to do all of the rest of what's in the book if you're not physically and mentally fit for it. And so that is the foundation for everything.
I mean, this is gold. I'm so grateful that you're sharing all this stuff. And we're running out of time here, but I do want to make sure we tell people where to find more about you, where to find more about your book, what you're up to. Where can we send them?
So Amazon.com, $100 million careers. My name, EmmySobieski.com is the easiest way to find me on a website. If you're like, oh my God, how do I spell that? I got to write that down. Just go on LinkedIn and search for me, Emmy Sobieski, or on Twitter. I'm, both of my handles are the same, Emmy Sobieski. And then there's also, I have a website that goes into EmmySobieski.com that is 100mil.careers, but that's almost as hard to remember. So those are the ways to find me. And if you ever need to message me, just message me on LinkedIn.
And we'll have it in the show notes as well for everybody listening. Emmy, thank you so much for spending time with us in Life in a Show. It's been amazing.
Thank you so much for the great questions. It was a wonderful hour.
Dude, that was a wild episode, man. She has accomplished a lot. And I mean, frankly, she's talking about some of this stuff and I'm like, I don't even know what she's talking about, man. Like she's so far advanced ahead of me. Like I find myself wanting to learn though, right? Like she's so passionate about it and she's so smart. I mean, it's so cool to see all the awesome things she's accomplished. Like, let's distill down though some of the lessons or some of our favorite points, man. Let me go back to earlier in the interview. One of the things that really stuck out to me that I thought really resonated was like how her dad had this huge influence on her and got her going down this path. Now, I know not all of us have or had dads like that, but it also just reinforced for me the importance of having a coach, a mentor, someone to kind of to help you, to guide you along this path of whatever you want to get into, man. It seemed like she had that built in. She was really fortunate in that case, but you can create this if you don't have it, right?
Right. And here's the thing about this, because think about it, your parents are probably the two most influential people in your life, right? So when you start listening to an interviews like this and you start seeing that this woman had this really, successful dad, and he's had such a big impact on her. And like for me, for instance, you guys, some of you might not know the story. I don't already know my dad. So the thing is, when you start looking from the perspective of who are my most influential people and who do I want to listen to, that's actually going to help me in my vision get to where I want to go. Now you start looking and searching out for those types of people. You talked about mentors and coaches and things like that. I always say to my students, be careful who you listen to. And sometimes that person might be your own voice because it's the negative kind of a thing. But when you start looking from that perspective of the mentors, are they teaching me or sharing stuff with me, and the stuff that I'm actually taking in that's going to lead me closer to my vision, help me my vision, that's the person I want to hang around with. That's the person I want to get advice from.
Yep. Man, another thing that struck me about her, clearly she's very sharp. But what I also detect in her is like, she didn't say this directly, but I felt it, is that she's really combined her passion and her skill set along with kind of the resources and connections and network she had. And she took all these into like this really awesome combination. But then she just took action and did it, and she moved up the chain. Like how many, each of her stories, whether it was compounding her money and making these other investments that did tremendously well for her, or if it's her ascension up the ladder from during each position, and how she just kind of strategically thought. Like she used the example of like when she was trying to get the one I think was a tech analyst position, where she got her boss's kids into school, and she's like, and I think she said it, she's like, how can I use what they want to help me get what I want? So she's just really like thoughtful and intentional on how to think, how to leverage herself, how to take the appropriate actions. I thought it was really cool.
Yeah, it's very strategic. And if you think about it, whatever you got going on, whatever you're passionate about, right, your skill set, right? We talk about this genius zone, and she kind of mentioned it at one point. When you have those two things that aligned, all of a sudden, what are you going to talk about? What are you going to be going after? How are you going to talk about this? You're going to talk about this till cows come home kind of a thing, right? And what ends up happening is you, I think, start to look out for those types of people. In her way, her industry, it's the hedge funds. So she started looking for those people who can help her, aligning herself with the people, helping them get what they want, and then in the end, she ended up getting what she wants kind of a thing. And when you start acting that way and going for and taking action, I think you are going to start to align yourself with people who are passionate about the same thing that you are. It kind of makes sense.
It's just really cool, man. And I think towards the end of the interview, we also covered some really important things that I thought were awesome. She said, and I asked a question like, what are some of the common traits like in the relationship between happiness and money? And you've worked for these 4 billionaires, like billions. And by the way, you got to get it. A billion is 1,000 million. Like that's a lot of money. Okay. So like, we're talking like next level here. And I thought, dude, it's so aligned with what we teach, because she said, one thing she said is she wants to control your calendar. Like, dude, this is what we talk about, right?
Right.
We did the demonstration at the Get a Life Getaway. Then with the Business Builder Workshop, we help people create a business to actually do that, so they can control their calendar. And then I thought that was one huge thing. And then she said also, the second thing for her is like to feel secure and confident and not care what other people think, having your own vision and not being influenced by others, man. I thought that was huge.
Yeah, I mean, think about those two ingredients, I think play a huge role in people's success, because if, I want to work, 5 hours a day kind of a thing, and now I have other people who are telling me you're doing this wrong, or you're not doing this, or, what you're going after. If you're an entrepreneur, you probably had somebody tell you you're doing something wrong, or you shouldn't be doing this, but if you start listening to them, and guess what? You end up going down the, kind of depressed or whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
But if you have the ability to set your ego aside, because I think it's the ego that creates that whole listening thing to, care what other people think kind of a thing. when you set it aside and you start controlling calendar, simplifying, she talked about simplicity. We talk about the 3-day Get Up, Giveaways. Simplicity is a huge part of the success formula, you know, and then leveraging. Leverage is a huge factor that she talked about. You know, in her case, she's leveraging the hedge funds, right?
Well, and
other people's money.
She said she's leveraging her time too, right? She said she's focusing on what can I do that's, and we talk a lot about this about the Business Builder Workshop. Like, what's the few things that have a disproportionate effect on the results I'm looking for, right? Like, is it like, how can I leverage my time in a way that's going to give me the results I'm looking for?
Yeah. So in the end, we do know what we're talking about, I guess, huh, Roger?
Look at that, man. I mean, we're not billionaires yet, but
we're getting there.
That's right. Right. Listen, we hope you guys have enjoyed this episode with Emmy. She's awesome. Go check out her book, you know, and she is a powerhouse, as you can tell.
Yep.
So yeah, love that we've had the chance and she shared her time with us in the Life in Her Show. But more than that, do something with this. This is like, you know, every week we come to you guys with like some great ideas, great nuggets, great, you know, pieces of advice from people that are doing amazing things. Like, so take it and do it, because listen, any of us can do it, right? We can do these things, and maybe we're going to become a billionaire, maybe we're not, but at the end of the day, we can be a whole lot happier and live a way better life than we are right now. So hope you've enjoyed the episode. We will see you next week.